Hello and welcome to Talking Peace. I am your host today, Deidre Email, Executive Director of the Western New York Peace Center. And I have a few other co-hosts with me today. We have Talia Rodriguez, our Gender Justice Task Force Chair. Welcome, Talia. And we also have our intern from Buffalo State College in Sociology, Diavion Weber. Welcome, Diavion. So today we wanted to talk about a really serious issue concerning domestic violence. November 25th was the National Day for Domestic Violence Awareness. And October was actually the International Month for Domestic Violence Awareness. I'm sorry, and they both are actually international. So we wanted to discuss this topic while we're still in the month of November, and deal with some of the points of the issue locally and around the world, and also give you some resources that would be helpful in your relationships and if you find yourself in a situation. So we'd like to thank Richard Wicca of Think Twice Radio for helping us with production and being our producer, and WBNY Radio. So let's get to the topic at hand. One of the things we want to, what would you all like to bring to this discussion? What type of feeling, what type of thoughts or things that we want to make sure we kind of hone in on this discussion? Talia?
For me, I think it's always language. I think it's really important that we define what we mean by domestic violence. And then, as you said, continue to give our listeners and our communities resources so that as they're processing their experiences, they can attribute language to those experiences.
Thank you. And Diavion?
I would say compassion and solution to get over domestic violence.
Yes. Wonderful, wonderful. I think I want to bring truth and rawness to the circle. And I think that is, all those pieces are so very important. They're essential to eradicating this issue of violence within the home. And the home is supposed to be, or home, and what I mean by home, I'm also talking about family, friendship, and intimate experiences we have with people. So it doesn't have to be man versus woman or woman versus man. It can be, any kind of intimate relationship you have in an atmosphere that you're supposed to feel safe. And you're supposed to be able to be yourself, and you're supposed to be able to let your hair down and feel stable. And when this is disrupted, what do we do? So let's talk about what is domestic violence. We looked at some definitions here, and I thought it would be great to, being a nerd that I am, I always look for like the definition from this, from this website, Shaz. So we went to Erie County Social Services, and we also have, so we have some nice, I would say some nice, there's some resources there, that's good. We also have some nice information here in front of us that we will share with you all on our website and in our social media. But domestic violence, according to Erie County Social Services, is a pattern of intentional coercive behaviors that may include verbal, physical, sexual, financial, and or emotional abuse directed against current or former spouses, partners, parents, children, or any family member in order to establish and maintain power and control. Some of these behaviors can be criminal acts. However, these behaviors are not necessarily illegal, but are abusive and controlling and designed to intimidate or instill fear. So we want to avoid all of that, in any type of situation where we feel we want to be in a situation where we feel empowered, not our power has been taken from us as human beings. So another thing it says here that victims of domestic abuse come from every culture, income group, age, and religion. They frequently share feelings of isolation, guilt, fear, shame, and helplessness. Intervention by the criminal justice system is often necessary, and with support, victims can emerge as survivors and no longer victims, I would add, because sometimes people kind of stay in a victim mindset, but we have to, come out of that and become whole. So, what do y'all think about that definition? Do you think that's pretty accurate, or do you think it needs more definition?
I think it's accurate. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was saying like domestic violence. I think people would consider it as just physical, but violence can also be physical and verbal. But I think you see more of a physical than verbal.
Yeah, most definitely. And I think that that's when people can identify it easier. I've seen situations where the wife was the aggressor and the husband was quite quiet, like his demeanor was quiet, but he would do a lot of passive aggressive things. So her personality was boisterous, it was loud, it was, physical, but the way they abused each other, his thing was very passive aggressive, like he would leave her at places, and she had to walk home. He would do like not weird things, but he would, like he's not going to yell back, but he would do different things to say, I disagree, instead of discussing and talking, and conflict resolution. Her thing was throwing irons or, physically handling him. And his thing was, well, I'm just going to leave you at the mall.
Yeah.
You find your own way home. So those both are abuses.
Absolutely.
Abuses. Both are
Absolutely.
abuse.
Yeah. Abuse can be physical, it can be financial, it can be psychological. And over time, you can see a measurable negative effect on someone's overall health, like their physiological health, from absorbing those various forms of abuse. I think for me, looking from the Latino lens, a lot of times what is abuse is this idea that they're going to deport us, right? That there's this idea that Latinos struggle with having people control their citizenship, thus where they physically are. And that's used as a source of power, right? So a lot of times, women, my sisters, they do not come forward for that reason because they're scared, or that's a source of manipulation, right? Something fortunately, their identities are manipulated by. The only other thing I would also add to is just the emphasis that it can be perpetrated on children. I think, like we said, a lot of times it's thought to be physical and it's thought to be amongst partners, but child abuse is domestic violence, and psychological abuse and physiological, financial abuse of your children is domestic violence. And I think it's important that people expand that definition so that they're able to kind of better process what they've experienced or what they may be going through.
It's a wonderful point, and something to truly consider, and maybe you have a lot more discussions about that. And not just looking at children, looking at elder abuse, because our definition talked about parents, children abusing their parents, whether they're older or or what have you, elder abuse, and just intimate partners. It can be a best friend, and your best friend has been using you over and over again, and you think that they really have your back, and they don't. They are opportunists, and they have been abusing you. And until we recognize these, like you said in the beginning, language, or definition, then we're never going to understand what we're really dealing with. We just know that we feel bad afterwards. We feel broken afterwards, you know.
The other word too is gaslighting. When I heard that word and I read the definition, I had these experiences where as a young person, I had learned this language. And for me, it was like this almost like attack of all these memories of things I had processed when you're learning the definition. So I think it may be covering gaslighting. It would also be helpful too. And if we could even, like you said, just have conversations about what these definitions mean, I think is a super resource. Did you want me to define it?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, so I'm just gonna read it like you said. I'm just gonna read like the straight definition. Gaslighting is a form of psychological abuse where a person or a group makes someone question their own sanity, perception of reality, or memories, right? People experiencing gaslighting often feel confused, anxious, or unable to trust themselves. And abusers use that a lot of times to make their victims second guess whether they are themselves responsible for the abuse.
Wow. Wow. That is very interesting. Wow, you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I wanted to go back a little to the child abuse is also domestic violence. I never even thought that both of them can be together, but now that I'm thinking about it, that can be true, especially like coming from the emotional abuse, because when I was younger, there were times when my family members would break me down, but it was like a specific family member that would do it, and it would make me feel like, really bad about myself. So, I mean, I don't really want to call it domestic violence, but that's probably what it is, because I was emotionally abused. It made me feel bad about myself. I was uncomfortable. When I was younger, I was honestly suicidal as well, because it was just a lot for me. So like I hated my childhood, and I always explained that I hated it.
Wow, yeah. Because I think there's a fine line between discipline, for training and consequences and abuse. It is a fine line. And a lot of it stems from culture, stems from societal norms, and when we grow up, we kind of, we look back and say, hey, was that normal? Some people look for certain experiences because they like, well, I didn't have that experience growing up, I'm not a part of this group, and I want to be a part, I'm the same color, I'm the same, I come from the same community, but my parents raised me differently, and they feel disconnected. So they think they need to be abused. They needed to have been, spanked or whipped or, different things like that to be a part of this particular community, or other, things that, that are a part of different communities and cultures that they think that is deemed as normal and a part of the growing up experience,
And then teacher, I was going to say, how many times do we know that it's normal that when we reach out to folks and we say one of our family members is missing, that they don't react in the same way? And we know that violence against women, specifically women of color by the state, is something that we continue to address, but also just thinking about, and I know we had acknowledged it earlier kind of off camera, about some of the women that are missing and how we as a community react to when we see people not taking the same amount of initiative to look for us, right, as they do others.
That's true. That's true. Or when people are just made aware of something, now it's an issue when it's been going on for so long, like, okay, like for instance, of course, we know many of the indigenous women, have been going missing, between in the Americas and between the United States and Canada specifically, and it's not an issue until it's someone closer that or you found out, and it's like, oh, it hit home. Now it's an issue. No, it's been an issue. These women have been going missing for a very long time now. There's no media, there's no, information. And I think that that's important too, that, you know, it's not an issue because now it's important to you. You know, it's always been an issue. And now you're aware of it. Now you're conscious of it, which now you are responsible for what you know, with it. So yeah, I think that's really important, you know, to think about how do we move forward once we have had different experiences like that. It's easy to perpetuate it, you know. I think when I was younger, I kind of had some, I would say, I don't think I was physically abused, but I think it was a lot of verbal abuse over the years that really tore some of my self-esteem, or, you know, or you know, some parts of me down, you know, whether it's someone that you love that said they hate you, or at other times, someone doesn't, you know, they're in when you're dealing with abuse from people that are drug or alcohol related, and they're saying things and doing things that is not them. And they'll say, hey, you know, I want to commit suicide. And you're 12 and you're looking at your parent like, what are you talking about? You know, like, what do I do with that information? How do I respond to that information? You know?
Yeah. Sorry, I was going to say,
No, go ahead.
in these spaces where we're sharing with each other as women, I think is that most important step. Like our young women who have the strength to say, I did not enjoy my childhood. That is an accomplishment. You've processed that, you've verbalized it. And like you said, like Deidre said, now how do we as women support each other with all the things that we've processed as children going forward? I know machismo, like when I found out all men don't run the world, I said, what? Because in the West Side on my street, they were running the world. So I think all of these different ideas, these languages, it made me feel empowered, because it made me feel like you said before, I wasn't the only one that had witnessed domestic violence, right? I wasn't the only one who had experiences that were adverse. And I think that when we create spaces like these of no judgment, of just saying, what we want to share, and that can be done outside, and people can emulate what we're doing right here. It's just coming together as women and saying, I want to support you, let's talk about this and how it's affected our lives. And you know, I'm your leadership for bringing this topic up. We know next month is Human Trafficking Month. January has been a month where we try to bring attention to the violence against our sisters. So I think that in January, not next month, but in January, when able to talk about that, it's something that I think kind of just very much aligns with this conversation.
Yeah, that'll be awesome. And January is also International Peace Month. Yes. So hopefully we will be doing a couple of things. Yeah, you know, that's and that sectionality and interconnectedness with all those pieces, because without justice, without ones that, you know, dealing with those who abuse and the abuse, without dealing with those things, we cannot have peace. And we have to start with peace within, you know, within our hearts, within our bodies, within our spirits. And that's what we're going to, share. But if we have turmoil within because we are broken, you know, we are going to commit the same type of violence to somebody else and continue a cycle, you know, of violence. And as we understand now, we have understood it, but as we have talked about it, we know that violence is more than physical, you know, and even final, this is violence we're looking at is control and power, you know. So one of the things I wanted to look at also was the history of domestic awareness. The history of Domestic Awareness Day, because I thought that was interesting, from November 25th, like where it came from. And excuse me, I got too many papers in front of me that I was exploring, so much information. but I still thought it was very interesting to look at. Let me see if I can find it. If not, we can probably just look it back over. Because what's nice is that what stemmed out of this, it was three Latino women, political activists that were killed, I believe in the 1980s, 1981. And let me see if I can find that information one more time. And I just thought it was just so interesting, you know, just how this came about, like, you know, and they were killed for it as political activists.
Yeah, our sisters in South America, Mexico, está peleando, right? Just to be acknowledged, to have the violence in some of our Central American countries address the rape, the murder. I mean, these women speak up knowing that if they speak and when they speak, they will be heard by people who will end their lives. And I am so inspired by their courage. And I think I'm also inspired by your courage too, because you alluded to something. Every single one of our abusers is a person, right? And understanding, like you said, Deidre, why that behavior is in their heart is sometimes an important process so that you can reconcile what it is that you're looking at. And I think that you're bringing, there's so much richness to this conversation as females. There's so much work that we have to do for ourselves and others so that we can be whole and participate.
That's right. That's right. So I think we found a little bit of some of the history. And I think, like I said, I think it's really important to understand where it's coming from and where we want to go. So a day for the elimination of violence against women. I got this from UN.org. Women's rights activists have observed the 25th of November as a day against gender-based violence since 1981. This date was selected to honor the Mirabal sisters, three political activists from the Dominican Republic who were brutally murdered in 1960 by order of the country's ruler, Rafael Trujillo. Now, before I go on, I thought this was quite interesting because these women were outspoken women that were murdered by the ruler, which was a male figure of power because of their activism. And this is what, you know, where we have to extend the word domestic, because what happens in the home happens in society and it happens in our nation. Like, it's not disconnected. You know, the same thoughts, the same culture, the same ideology of what we feel, how we respect the other gender or under, you know, genders is how we are going to work in the rest of society. You know, I remember this Nobel Peace Prize laureate, Wangari Maathai. She was the first female that in Kenya. She was the first female that was able to get on their, council, their Congress, to be in their Congress. But the president of the country laughed her to scorn before she made this, these steps, laughed her to scorn as she was an activist for environmental justice and women's rights there in Kenya. And then once she got a seat in the government, she began to make, more progress. But he laughed her to scorn in front of everyone, and it just was a reflection of what happens in the four in the four walls, So on December 20th, 1993, the General Assembly adopted the Declaration of the Elimination of Violence Against Women through Resolution 48104, paving the path towards eradicating violence against women and girls worldwide. So during this time, we invite they invite governments, organizations, to bring about this public awareness each year. So I wanted to give them honor, these three women, our Dominican sisters, that were brutally murdered by a patriarchal system. You know, to me, it's not disconnected. It's, it's all connected, because as one nation watches another, they are also examples of what they should do in theirs.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's gender-based violence. Men run government and they commit violence against women, and it's gender-based, state-based violence. But like you said, it imitates what happens in the home. I think we should honor them. And I know, I have some limited time to be with you, but in the time that I am with you, I want to acknowledge our sisters who are in immigrant detention centers who are absorbing violence every day, whether that be psychological or physical, and to say that there's two very distinct kind of violence in America, one that has a place to be reported and the other that has a place that is not reported. And both of those types of violence need to be acknowledged, because no filing a paper complaining about those security guards thinking that in injustice they will be addressed, right? So I think that you just bringing up the fact that internationally gender-based violence is something that we need to address, and then bring that to the micro level of the home is a very, very good point.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, thank you, Talia. Just let me know when you have to go. I know.
I'm gonna stay with you for about another 5 minutes, and then I'm gonna run. But I just want to thank you for involving me in the conversation, and also for hosting an intern from Buffalo State. I'm so proud to be on the line with you.
Yeah, it's really awesome to have you. And so our Women's March, coming up, speaking of international and so on, we have our local Women's March coming up in next May. So I'm really, and guess what? May is Victorious Women's Month. Okay.
May is also the month I gave birth to a 10.5-pound baby. So I'm ready. I'm ready to celebrate women. That's amazing. I'm so, AJ was 10.5 pounds. But Deidre, I'm excited to know how much energy we put into the Women's March. And we had one digital and it was amazing. And there was fellowship, sharing. But I'm so excited to be able to plan to have it in person and not be in the cold, because we're out there always with scarves.
Exactly.
More folks from the audience join us, but thank you for reminding us of that. That's something that we're really excited about.
Yeah. So I'm excited. Hopefully, you continue to be our task force chair, and get to planning with me. And we just want, encourage partners to come out. And this can be one of our issues, because if we have some time, we wanted to kind of touch base on some of the domestic violence that's happening locally during this time of COVID. Did you have anything that you wanted to talk about that, Talia, before you go?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I think as you acknowledged, from some of my research, I think it's been up by about 36%. That there are some local organizations who Jiparos Unidos and others that are culturally affirming, language affirming, gender affirming, and that I would just say, Deidre, and I know you've said this, with a voice of compassion, if you're listening or watching this and you feel as if you're experiencing domestic violence, or you even may have a question to learn more, please reach out to the resources that we acknowledge and or us, so that we can be a resource to give you information to be on the right path. Because we are very lucky to have a lot of resources here in the city, as opposed to some of our sisters in our rural communities.
Thank you, Talia.
Thank you for having me. I'm going to turn. You know how proud I am of your leadership. Thank you so much for having me in this space. And I'll talk to you soon. Okay.
Okay. I'll see you later.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. So, so we can continue our discussion for a little while longer. There's some information that you found about international domestic violence. And we want to talk a little bit more about that.
Okay, so there was a mom who was killed in New Jersey. It was her and her kids by her husband. They say it's her estranged husband, and they call it murder-suicide, because I guess he killed her and then killed the 2 kids and then committed suicide. She had told her landlord to change the locks on the doors. She was too scared to, call the police, let the police in on what's going on. So she told her landlord in hopes that he would change the locks, but he never did. And he got in and he killed everyone and himself.
Wow.
And my question is basically, when do people intervene? Like why didn't the landlord do something? Like when was he going to intervene? Like
Right.
why didn't he do, try to help her out?
Try to
Like
help
what
her out.
was the reason?
Right. I think that I think that's a great question. And what we see as a pattern in domestic violence, as you research it and you see and you meet victims and so on, you a lot of times, victims don't leave right away. Victims usually would stay for various reasons, like we talked about before, like whether it's they want to keep the family together, or whether that I love him or I love her, because we want to talk, we want to make sure that it is a balance, because it's not just men, being, violating women, but it can be vice versa. And like we talked about, whoever has the power in a home or relationship can be the aggressor. And so I think that when we start to see that, especially let's say as a landlord, how many times have we seen this situation, with different couples or families coming in and out? I'm just, kind of thinking or trying to put myself in his shoes and see, how important was it? How much time delayed, between the two? When she asked for him to change the locks and, when he was getting around to it, and I think that, I think we have to take it serious, but as people deal with victims, we also have to be patient, because it goes beyond physical. It is very much psychological. And if you can get out of the idea of continuing the abuse or allowing that person to come in one more time, or that kind of thing, I don't think it's an easy solve,
Yeah.
or even just recognizing that you're being abused in the first place,
One thing she said about like the gaslighting, I think, how would we create peace if the abusers gaslight everything? How would they eventually, create peace if they gaslight? Because gaslighting is like they don't see what they're doing. So how do they change as the abuser if they don't see that?
That's a great question. I'm going to, as my husband would say, I'm going to take that I'm going to share from Dietrich's dictionary, from my thoughts, I think that's where, when I said, what I want to see brought to the table is truth. That is what we have to begin at, truth. And when the abused admits to themselves that they are being abused and that this isn't right, and how to express that to the abuser, you may need a mediator, you may need a counselor or someone that can help to keep a peaceful space while you're being heard. And sometimes if your partner is reasonable, you can reason those things out, and talk about patterns and talk about cycles. But sometimes because we got to think about the abuser more than likely have been abused. Like at one point or sometime in their life, they have learned to abuse others, usually by being abused. So they are a victim as well. And they need help. So they have to tell themselves the truth. I need help. This isn't right what I'm doing, So that may take some time to get to.
To piggyback on what you're saying, so like my boyfriend, he's like, I think he gaslights a lot of the things.
Smoke screen.
Yeah. And he was abused when he was younger by his mother's boyfriend at the time.
Mm,
And I told him he should get help with that because it's clear that he still holds on to that emotion.
yes.
And but as far as the gaslighting thing, he doesn't feel like he gaslights me,
Of course
but
not.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, but I think it's good that he's open to the opportunity of like getting help.
Yes.
So maybe gaslighting is something that I should let him know to
Yes.
talk with the therapist about, because probably he'll begin to see that.
Yes. And when you're in discussion or conversation and you see it, you might have to pause and say, do you see what just happened right now? Did you
And sometimes
see? Yeah, that right. It was like, okay, then you have an argument about that.
Yeah.
But sometimes you have to pause and put a red flag out. This is the situation right now. I know we were talking about this, but this is what you're doing. And we can't keep talking about this because it's not helping us, so we have to break the cycle, so that's where a counselor can help, I think, or a therapist or someone that you trust, that can help you hear each other and sometimes help a person hear themselves. And then they have to admit. When you admit to something, abused and the abuser, when you admit to your behavior and you take responsibility for your own actions, it makes you vulnerable. It makes you vulnerable. And when you feel vulnerable, you feel like you're open to anybody else's abuse or darts or, anything else to come at you. And it's going to make you feel less powerful. But we have to create safe spaces to kind of rebuild, let them know that they are in a safe space and that they can be safe with you and they can break down those barriers and those walls, because there are barriers and walls and they're trying to hold on to some type of power. Sometimes it's just having power to not be beat up. So they're going to give excuses or they're going to.
It's funny because he always expressed that, like, he's like this because of his past.
But now you're responsible for your future. So you might have came out, a certain way, out of your past, but you don't have to stay there, and you don't have to continue the pattern. We can break the cycle. So individually, we have to break the cycle. Within our family, we have to break the cycle. And when we start to do that, we start to break the cycle in our culture, in our communities. But that takes a lot of work, so the question, are we willing to do the work? So I wanted to share a couple other things before we go on some of the things that's happening right now to bring awareness to this issue. So there are the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence that was built off of or grew out of November 25th, the International Day of Elimination of Violence Against Women. So it's called 16 Days of Activism Against Gender-Based Violence. It's an annual international campaign that's kicked off on November 25th, and it runs until December 10th, Human Rights Day. And it was started by activists at the inaugural Women's Global Leadership Institute in 1991. And it continues to be coordinated each year by the Center of Women's Global Leadership. It is used as an organizing strategy by individuals and organizations around the world to call for the prevention and elimination of violence against women and girls, specifically. But of course, no human deserves to be violated and to be held prisoner under abuse. So what you'll see up until December 10th, and of course beyond, is Coloring the World Orange: End Violence Against Women Now. So we'll have these logos and information on our website and on our social media. And we just invite you to continue to share, coloring the world orange and making people aware of this situation, of this violence, this type of violence that's occurring locally, nationally, and internationally. We also wanted to give you some contact information if you find yourself in this situation. Did you have some contact information, or you had another story?
Yeah, I was looking.
Okay, so we'll give that contact information, right after the Avion, and make sure you get that before we get off the radio today.
So just one last thing. When you guys mentioned patriarchy,
yes,
if I'm not mistaken, women's rights began in like the 19th century, and we know that domestic violence happens more amongst women than men. And I just feel as though like it's always a power thing. So last semester I was taking a gender course, and we were reading like For the Love of Men. We were like discussing patriarchy, what men go through, and their expectations. I was trying to look for there was this place that men live longer because it's like more equal. And I just feel like if there was more equality amongst women and men, would domestic violence, be better? Because it's no longer just women being attacked anymore from men, because no one feels like overpowered.
Yes.
So just be equal. I'm trying to find it. I'm not sure.
No, I think that's really important to look at, because what we talked about earlier was how what's happening domestically or in the home happens societally. You look at a whole nation, so you have ideology, how we understand gender, how we understand gender roles. And then we have to look at it also legislatively, the Constitution, legislation. It was a time that, like you were talking about as far as suffrage rights and so on, it was a time that women could not vote. Why? Once they became married, they lost a lot of, property ownership and so on, and being able to vote also had to deal with property ownership, so all those things are very much connected economically, and power in this society, in a capitalistic society, is very much connected with power. So they ask, well, who wears the pants, and in your family, what happened? And when they, or at least a few years ago, and it's not too long ago, when women worked outside the home and men, they didn't, let's say they were off or they were laid off, whatever. Now, you have more women working, let's say in a family situation. Now, oh, your woman is wearing the pants, she's, ruling everything. She's making all the decisions. Or vice versa, where you have women that, may have, they started their career, they're, they feeling good about themselves and they're going to work and so on. And now they're kind of putting down their male counterpart, significant other, because they have a certain pride about themselves. And they're like, well, you're not a man, you're not, making as much as I am, and yes, they both exist. And yes, they're both are wrong, and to understand how we can lift each other up, and how, before the Industrial Revolution, men and women and families worked cottage industries, whether it's the agricultural, industry. So they all had to do a part of the work to feed themselves. One part of the work wasn't more important than the other. So for example, if the woman cast the seed and planted the seed, then the man harvested, which one was more important? They both were quite important, aren't they? Yeah, because you cast a seed and it grows and nobody, harvests it, you still can't eat, or vice versa. So, but, so that's a whole nother history, to talk about the history of the Industrial Revolution and women's role. I really like, discussing or getting into, but we don't have that much time anymore. So that'll be another discussion. But yes, I think that it's very much connected economically. And that's why one of the parts of our definition was financial, having either control over the finances or and the other partner doesn't have that kind of control. And they can't, do or be as free in society as they would. Because the other partner is controlling the finances, so they can't be as independent. So like that's our time now. I just wanted to thank you all for listening in to Talking Peace. I wanted to share some contact numbers. If you find yourself in an abusive situation, you can call. There is an Erie County number you can call at 716-858-6118. And we also have one of the local nonprofits we wanted to uplift is Rahama, and that's spelled Rahama, which is an organization led by Muslim women that deals with domestic violence. And their number, and they also share a space here with us at the Network for Religious Communities. They have an office here at 1272 Delaware, and their phone numbers are 1-800-799-7233 or 716-777-3468. And their local number again is 716-777-3468. So you can, also call them and or crisis services, which we'll have posted later on Facebook. So we just thank you all for tuning in, and thank you, Yavian, for having this discussion with me. It was really an honor, and you had great info to bring to the table. And so until next time, you're listening to Talking Peace. Thank you.